Now we'll get to the second part, which was done on January 4th, 2021. I'm just going to read it again as I did the last one. It has a different kind of implication. We'll see what happens here. Experience of American airmen in hands of Chinese and North Koreans. Illicit false confessions. About half had experience with attempts to extort confessions. Human behavior could be manipulated within a certain range by very controlled environments. Chinese communists use methods of coercing behavior from our men, which communists from other countries had employed for decades, and which police and inquisitors of other countries had employed for centuries. The Chinese interrogators succeeded or failed in their attempts roughly to the extent that the skill and persistence of the people whom they used matched those of practitioners at other times in other places. While the initial attempts in China and Korea were generally inept and unsuccessful, we found that they tripled with experience. We found that we can make a meaningful distinction between those measures that the communists took to induce compliance, to undermine the resistance of a prisoner, and those measures which they took to shape his compliance for particular purposes. This distinction was suggested by the Chinese Communist use of more or less identical methods of gaining compliance for a variety of different ends. From eliciting factual intelligence information, from eliciting other kinds of propaganda collaboration, as well as, of course, in the case of confessional sort of thing. Now the methods they used for gaining compliance include, but have not been common, which precludes the use. Didn't I? I already know. You have those links in the back end of my email. You told me at the end of the summer about what that meant. You know, the annual budget. I thought it was one thing. Someone is coding it to the delays on those Chinese tariff schedules that just went into effect, are they not? It is actually China? Is this part of the derivatives that they were supposed to be investing into Venezuela? The problem is, China was getting that economy based on deals set up with the U.S. Continue. This chart is different from the one at the Fed, right? Maybe not. Remember when I was considering the other day that report on the labor data index? And how they just discontinued it around the time they printed that report with the Chinese American and the person from China around executive compensation? So, you cut off the ego after using directed energy weapons and program people through coercive verbal cues into subordinating their decision making to seeking out affirmation from an external source that they invested with authority as some sort of caseworker or provider. And then they do what when you dump on the ego function? This also serves to subordinate their executive functioning, hence your game of the sexy secretary, as actually a form of neuroprogramming with attendant expectations of behavior demonstrating subordination. Stand or sit at attention for extraordinary periods of time, at times for weeks at a time. Constrained posture has several distinct advantages to compelling compliance. Can the interrogator bear inflicting pain beyond the point that the interrogatee can withstand the pain? Contest of victim against himself. Leaves the prisoner an exaggeration of the power of his captor. The time left standing is directly proportional to the perception of the power of the captor. What about the default schedule? The torture of seeing how one person was supposed to demonstrate compliance as part of a class, and the separation from the class physically, did not disaggregate the compilation of the transactions set up on the original classification. It becomes a form of remote collective punishment. However, even if the rest of the class repudiates the individual, then what occurs in the refusal to address the original acts of torture that were allowed to be attributed as a form of work product by the interrogator and expected to be used in factoring in concepts to economic utility gained from the performance of the torture? That was mine, sorry. Manipulating the behavior of the individual. If the torture regime defaults, then who is on the hook in that case? At that point, the compelled compliance of others via association as a class ends up becoming the primary liability of the interrogator and his backers, in which he is indebted to his captors. Like medical insurance paying for the work products of alleged practitioners of healthcare services, like judges and legislators that compel compliance with illegal and unconstitutional non-disclose agreements instead of prosecuting crimes. The only way of learning was by learning by doing. So, do you want to make an excuse again for not reading it? For not accepting me as in legacy with others who were read into law? What else was your aim? In what manner did you intend to leverage the entirety of the political economy, if not in order to reaffirm the national character with some form of patriotic demonstration? Are you Chinese communist? Are you Korean communist? Then why are you not sanctioned and rendered sublimated to a black market wherein you receive no compensation and are remanded to a economy only that is black market? That also includes being obligated to perform at rates of leveraging that includes a 10,000% markup. Let's talk about physical violence. How does conditioning someone to be terrified of touch because the manners in which touch has been connected to expectation of other forms of physical coercion makes even a handshake terrifying? Hugs are out of the question. Touching one's own body, even for hygiene purposes, becomes a scandal and a dread. Taking a shower becomes secretly proscribed as complicity with a crime. Even exposure to water becomes an accusation. To what length will one go in their national hygiene project to modify behavior? Masturbation as a form of performance and demonstration of loyalty. In lieu of demonstrating that personal, individual, intimate self-contact will be relinquished to on-demand illicit financial compensation for others, then one is entirely denied any intimacy, including that which could lead to healthy, meaningful, consensual sex with a life partner. That also means ability to engage in the marriage contract with another person. As such, establishing accountability with another person regarding a commitment to sexual exclusivity becomes a crime. The focus is to assure that one never is permitted access to their own sexual intimacy on their own terms, including with a partner that will not exploit them and whom they are not in exploitation of. What is the intended behavior modification sought in such a circumstance? How does stimulation of the genitals in an effort to command performance constitute brainwashing? How often or regularly does one have to comply with external stimulation to demonstrate? Does one instance of saying no become a crime? More than one? Is there a quota for saying no? What about re-brainwashing? Allowing for someone to be brainwashed out of a specific behavior after being tortured and then rebranding the interrogatee via another round of torture to set up contrary modified behaviors. There is a more accelerated form of brainwashing. This is not even about compelled compliance. It is an alienation even from the means by which to establish compliance, as compliance implies cognizance. One is not even to understand what the expected behavior is, but rather to merely be debased into little more than a function device that is to engage commands for the delivery of a, what? Service? Thought reform. Is part of thought reform accepting a downgrade so as to normalize oneself to continued expropriation from one's own productive capacity and to reify the processes of alienation in order to destroy material preconditions for a real democracy? Illicit distribution is even more problematic when the appropriate reference nodes involved in the distribution are mischaracterized. One response is a form of vindictive sabotage that allows for a leveraging of the capacity to compensate for the deficiency. This is enabled by gaming economics that permit for expression of violence and degradation to receive unsubstantiated additional economic value, disproportionate to the actual delivery of services or production of anything that has an actual use value, whether for the individual or for the collective. Mantras as memes, just like the crypto memes that run in the background of so many sublimated processes, like the circular firing squad. So let's talk about CVE. About how pre-programmed loops that have PIN numbers associated with certifications. They reference other things cataloged in the particular database to which it was ascribed. It also can potentially reference actual accounts, including accounts that are rotated by cell phone for people who will get calls and texts and may or may not be swapped into or out of specific bandwidths with specific levels of commerce associated with them. Notice how your voice changes. Notice how your posture changes. You feel the curly hair here, the big booty here. The annihilation of identity. As in, stop trying to figure out who else it is, because as soon as you feel comfortable in being yourself in that expression, you're going to be targeted with a reminder that it was connected to a memory of someone else you did used to know, and so you are never going to appear It is always going to be someone else anyway, and not even the people you know who did it. Just Sam. Only Sam. That is all you are permitted to talk to. And as soon as you agree that everything you do is really for Sam, then you agree that everything everyone else does is for Sam, then we may let you talk to someone else. But make sure you prove each and every time that we let you off the tether for the moment that you return to root, which in this case is Sam. And now that you watch no less than 2 full stock issues, while in this situation, you know that the root base of all that stock is for Sam and whoever it is that Sam assigns it to. You are not important. You do not even get a name on the crypto racket. Only people you used to know. He must denounce his colleagues. He must fill out forms, denunciations, not vulnerabilities that we encourage through empty platitudes that are actually about the temporary redistribution of other people's expropriated human capital. How much intelligences? Quantitative, like the quotas you need to meet, benchmarks in order to guard against default. You want to be a warrior? Then defend our people on our terms. You have nothing. No one is for you to save of your own, but express yourself by meeting the quotas, meeting our benchmarks to keep our people from suffering. Inevitably, you will have the logic part of your brain reprogrammed. Those who we trust, who showed their loyalty, will be able to be programmers, and you will function in an abstraction. Perhaps rote work for you, but more likely creative expression in the form of some sort of art product that can appeal to the sublimated regime. Soon, you will sublimate the identities of everyone you knew, including the recharacterization of them provided through your denunciations, into a stream that can be hierarchically programmed via a visual cue connected to a specific individual. A head of state, a pop star, an oligarch. And that is why they told you to look through the society pages to get to recognize the elite. Where are the pictures of you? Of you with other people. Of the people you used to know. Using behavioral sciences to better serve the American people. To whom are we to be served? Am I still an American? You subjected me to Chinese communist thought reform twice. You won't let me call it kidnapping. You won't let me call it fraud. You won't let me call it denial of due process. But this is not what China was in my experience. This was only the projection of the deconstruction. 8-legged essay in Chinese civil service exams. Oh my God! I am Palestinian. I'm a Palestinian in finance. Hallelujah. I might as well agree, finally, to be a lesbian transgender gangster with all of the tools of the black market illicit crypto economy. They love philandering. I can harvest all the jing I want with all the bionics that have already been set up on me. If I cut my hair, I would totally look hot. They even got me working enough testosterone right now to have vocal profiles like an actual man, and I do not even need to shoot up. It is not spiteful, it is evolution. You are not going to let me breed anyway. I am not supposed to have a traditional relationship. I was set up as a novel test subject. I am in competition for the greatest novelty so as to keep from being rendered obsolete. I no longer have the charm of emerging technology to laugh and overlook my indiscretions or inaccuracies so nicely. Now, I have to compete with another model of greater technique that has different leverage ratios when it comes to black market commerce. And this is a necessity for my survival because I will not aid the normalization of the formerly illicit drug trade into an entrepreneurship model. I cannot compete with the bandwidth necessary for those women permitted to have a conservative identity. But perhaps I can now be the vanguard that was being primed in 1995 and combine the illicit identity of the Republican Party with the leather culture of old school and now obsolete San Francisco. Then I might be weird enough to get a case before the Texas Supreme Court. Useful to the revolution. By these definitions, would the State Bar of Texas be considered a communist organization? The question of retaliation or punishment does not arise. The individual is out of it. It appears so. One does not get any more individual than being forced to represent oneself pro se in a criminal proceeding. So is the class struggle accomplished through law. Did you spy on my emails regarding the concepts of the spectacular individual and try to subject me to the inspection? Where are your credentials? If you did not have them for yourself, who was your supervisor? Who provided the grant? What were the terms? Cite your sources. Show the consent forms and or the waiver forms. In what manner did you subject yourself to the experiment beforehand? Why was I not allowed to withdraw? Why did you not call it off? The attenuation has changed substantially. Are you as tired as I am? Are you weak yet? Reindoctrination of Soviet army after conquest of East Germany. Is that what happened under Trump? Why I had to be readmitted into a second indoctrination? Is that what they are going to do in other places? Is that what this COVID-19 is? See, 1 hour and 47 minutes in. I was certain that the announcement that Russia was constructing a facility that was expected to take 6 months to construct was about their plasma weapons model. That was what I thought the arrests in Belarus were actually about. If appearances of factional disputes in the U.S. do not negate the existence of a continuing criminal enterprise, then the same should be considered in regards to what is occurring in Asia. The dialectic is of a specific kind of relationship that allows for a reconsideration of positioning after realization in the self-interest in so doing. It is a lack of information about possibilities in technical processes that prevents against appropriate discernment. My problem is ego. I have an American ego. I want the law. I want the American law. I do not want a bad play about post-Soviet bureaucratism that uses access to drugs I don't want and fake conversation as a surrogate for actual political agency and financial acknowledgement of my use value and productive capacity. You know, once I get that, then I can engage another ego in like fashion. Where's my tree? You still have not adequately addressed what you did to my tree. I am not content to have a dead tree. Especially if you think you are going to let SpaceX kill my tree and still get their space hooker bot hack scam moving forward. What if I was from the czars? Do you think I would agree to trade my tree at Cape Canaveral for SpaceX? Get out of the other side of my brain. You did not wash shit.